Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Functional Aging Summit 2020. Really excited to have you guys here to talk about one of my favorite topics, power training for older adults. Our title for today is Stop Loading and Start Exploding. Really excited to talk about this once again. I've been speaking about the benefits of power training and how to do this with older adults for probably about 15 years now or more. And I really appreciate Keiser being a sponsor of the summit and also of this session. We've used Keiser in our facility for, well, since 2007, since we opened. We selected it because of its ability to not only be used for strength training, but also high-speed power training as well. So we'll highlight some of the benefits of Keiser and some of the equipment as we go through, just simply because we've gotten so much benefit out of it, and our clients have gotten so much benefit out of it as well. So really excited about having them on board for our summit. I'm going to take a little bit different approach today than I typically do. I've presented on this at a lot of conferences in many different countries, and typically what I do is I spend quite a bit of time going through the research on power training and looking at different studies, either individual studies or systematic reviews and meta-analyses, drawing conclusions from them, kind of putting the pieces together. Well, today I think what I'm going to do is skip over a lot of that heavy research type of information, and I'm going to try to just put it together for you and summarize it for you. And that way we can, I think, move on more quickly to some of the practical applications of how to do power training with different types of clients, which I'm sure is one thing that you're very interested in getting to. We're kind of living in an interesting time when it comes to training for older adults. I think hopefully we've gotten out of this mentality that, we need to take it easy, that we need to go slow and be gentle with our older clients. Certainly some require that, no doubt about it. But kind of this overall kind of very cautious baby approach where we're just going to roll our ankles and our shoulders, sit in a chair or lift some pink dumbbells. We really know that's not optimal. Any activity is good at any stage in life. Exercise is powerful. Just getting up and doing something, just walking, as an example, can lead to tremendous benefits. But we're fighting against the clock here. We're trying to optimize the joy of life that our older clients are coming to us with kind of that goal in mind. And so we want to help optimize their functionality. And certainly this is beneficial, but not optimal. But then we also have this. We have, these memes and images of older adults, even in their 80s, doing heavy backloaded squats and deadlifts, and kind of the deadlifting granny. It was popular there for a while on Facebook, it seemed. But the reason we're seeing this is there's been a shift, and there's been a movement that many have taken, saying, hey, if we want to really have healthy quality of life, good levels of function as we're older, we need to lift heavy, need to lift hard, regardless of your age. And there certainly are some benefits for doing that. And you see that even in books like the Barbell Prescription. And so the question is this how seniors should exercise? I think that's a really good question that I pulled from their website, I think from their blog post. When they're recommending heavy basic lifting exercises for older adults as kind of being the thing that you need to do, or at least the best thing that you need to do. But we also see a kind of another approach is kind of this athletic, get out and experience life. Don't necessarily focus on heavy lifting or any sort of one training program, but just be active, compete, swim and jog and ride your bike and hike, and be vigorous in life and try to keep doing the things that you love to do. And there certainly is a lot of evidence to support this as well, because even in the longest lived, healthiest populations on earth, the vast majority of those don't exercise formally at all, even as they get into their 70s, 80s, and 90s. What they do is they work hard, a lot of physical labor, a lot of movement, a lot of walking and biking, and just staying very active. And so, the question really comes down to, well, which of these approaches is best? Is there something in between? Well, if you kind of know anything about what we really espouse here, at FAI, you know that we've created this model of function, and these are the domains that we think are very important that feed into physical function. So these are ones that need to be addressed. And from an aging standpoint, there's a huge degree of variability between individuals. The aging process does not affect everybody the same way, and some of that's due to genetics for sure, but a lot of it's due to lifestyle factors, and we're talking 50, 60, 70 years of lifestyle factors. And so some individuals need to focus on one or more of these domains more than other people. And so you see, as part of our approach, we're trying to be comprehensive, but you see power as one of those important areas that we feel need to be addressed. And so we often recognize that we need to do strength training, but don't often recognize the value of speed and power training for our older clients. We also understand that when it comes to the variability between our clientele, we're dealing with a lot of different functional levels. So this is the hierarchy of functional aging that we've developed to try to help identify kind of these differences in functional abilities and how that might impact the exercise prescription and programming that we are going to deliver for older adults. Or definitely a one-size-fits-all approach probably is not going to work. We just see too much heterogeneity in this population. And so we will look at programming later on from frail to the elite and how to adjust our power programming accordingly. We won't really deal with the dependent person. Those are individuals that typically need medical care. They're in nursing homes, in assisted living centers. And so typically physical therapists will be dealing with those individuals. But we will hit at least on some of these other groupings and see how programming needs to adjust accordingly. Now we understand this is really a continuum. Your function isn't in different chunks or steps like we have here, but this is a good way to try to wrap your mind around some of the key differences in these functional levels. So let's talk about power training. First off, what is it? I've been using this slide for a long time to try to explain what power training is. We typically think about power training as power lifting, like this Olympic lifter that we see here has this huge amount of weight that they manage to get over their head. But power is really just about force and velocity and the combination of those two factors. Interestingly enough, this power lifter really doesn't generate a lot of power, as you see from the comparison below, that even though the snatch is a lot of weight, over 300 pounds as an example, so a lot of force, the shot put at a much smaller weight, a much smaller load, doesn't require near as much force, but somebody doing a shot put generates a lot more power. And why is that? Obviously because the speed of the movement is so much greater. So don't be fooled into thinking that increasing power means increasing load. Oftentimes it doesn't. And we'll compare kind of some of these load variations and speed variations. As you go up in load, obviously you cannot go as fast in your movement. So speed is going to go down as load goes up and vice versa. And that definitely affects power output. In addition, we need to be concerned about muscle power for older adults because it drops off and can become a significant impairment to muscle function and to overall physical function, quality of life, and health. We often recognize that muscle strength is an area that needs to be addressed because our older adults are losing muscle strength, and this process of sarcopenia has a lot of different ramifications, including muscle power, because our speed, our contractile velocity, is also being impacted by the aging process and the sedentary process and other factors. But leg strength drops off, power is dropping off faster. And we know that power is an important variable to address, as we see in this sort of example. When we compare strength and power to the ability to do certain tasks, we see pretty consistently that muscle power is just as or more highly correlated with functional ability than is muscle strength. Now, muscle strength and muscle power are also very tightly linked. You know, they're brother, sister. It's hard to separate one from the other because obviously power is dependent upon force development. It is dependent upon strength. So you improve your force capability or your speed capability, you're going to improve power. So these two things are entangled, and we want to keep it that way. We want to think about it in that manner, not as being really separated. But we do know that power is probably more closely related to performance than strength is. So if you think being strong is important for your older clients, you really need to think that, well, being powerful is likely even more important for your clients in order to maintain their function, to do the stuff that they really like to do in life and they need to do in life. So to put together kind of what we know right now about power training, and we'll cover some more details following this, but let's look at kind of some of the basics. One, we know that power training is really an essential aspect of functional longevity. That is, if we want to continue to do the things that we like to do in life for a long time and for as long as possible, that we need to have an appropriate amount of muscle power, and we need to maintain our muscle power to as high a degree as we can. We often think about strength training as being essential, and then power training is over here on the side as an option. You know, something that we could do, we can incorporate it, maybe we slide in some stuff every now and then. But what we see in the literature is really the opposite, that really power training should be the sole feature, the focus of our training program, and maybe strength is set off to the side as being kind of the second aspect that we want to focus on. That's really a flip and hard for a lot of people to get their mind around. But the research has been very clear, is that there seems to be beneficial aspects of power training over strength training, and there don't seem to be any downsides of power training instead of strength training. So we'll consider some of these variables as we kind of go along. But in addition, it's also been shown to be very safe for all types of older adults, from anywhere from the frail to the fit and athletic. This is something that research is really focused on because many trainers, many professionals are often fearful of getting their clients to move quickly and to do power training and to really speed up their movements. So you need to be assured that it is safe for all levels of function. And it's also been shown to be safe, appropriate, and effective for many, many conditions. This is also an area that has been looked at in the research much more recently. What about people with osteoporosis or osteoarthritis or frail individuals? What if they've got Parkinson's or some other neurological condition, or their balance is impaired? All of these conditions have been addressed in the power training literature, and we know that power training is beneficial for these conditions, and it's safe. We don't see any problems with injury. In fact, the majority of injuries in all these studies across the board comes from testing, doing things like 1RM strength testing or some sort of functional testing, or somebody might lose their balance. So power training, very safe and effective. Obviously, you have to employ it in the right way. We'll go through some of those here in just a bit. As much as we know about the benefits of power training, what we really don't know as much about is kind of the optimal programming. And that includes, what is the optimal load to use for power training? One thing that has kind of risen to the surface, especially recently, is that low load and high speed training seems to offer some advantages over high speed or low, kind of lower speed, high load training in many instances. And I can't say that across the board. Certainly from a functional standpoint, as far as physical function goes, and a lot of these tasks that we might, our older adults are wanting to perform on a daily basis, there seem to be some advantages for speed training at lower loads. And kind of to that point, though, is some newer research coming out of Spain has taken this approach that has come up in some athletic training programs, and that is Bill and Bob come in as older clients, and they both have the same measured power capability. Well, Bill, he is getting most of his power from his force. He's strong, and so he can generate a lot of force, but not as much speed as compared to Bob. Bob is not as strong, but he's faster. So he can't lift as much, his force can't go as high, but he can move the loads faster. They both have the same result in power output, but Bill is what we'd call force dependent, and Bob would be velocity dependent, meaning they are deficit in the other one. So Bill, because he generates a lot of force, but he's slower, would be velocity deficit, and Bob would be force deficit. So they both wanting to improve their power. What's going to help Bill improve his power and probably his function, his functional ability, and this carries over even into sports and higher level activities, is not going to be the same as what works for Bob. And this has been shown in some younger populations in which they matched their either force or velocity deficit and match their programming to meet those needs. And matching their deficits was more advantageous than just doing a generic power training or plyometric type program. And we're probably going to see that same thing happening in older adults, because we know that older adults from the initial research can be force deficit and velocity deficit as well. So this adds to kind of the heterogeneity that we're seeing in the older population, and maybe someday we'll have some tools to be able to better address or better decide what kind of deficit they're coming in at so that we can better match our programming. But right now we really don't have that. And so because of that, we'll look at some kind of load manipulations for different outcomes and different functional levels from the current research we have. But also that plays into using a wide variety of techniques and equipment. Now, what you choose is obviously going to vary depending on the functional ability of the client, and we're going to hit on that very specifically, but also on the goals and outcomes that you're trying to achieve. It's going to vary a little bit in how you apply these strategies and how you apply the programming, what equipment you use, what exercises you use, etc. But there's a lot that's available to you, and there seem to be very similar benefits from doing machine type work versus floor type work, body weight, resistance bands, even in the pool. There seems to be a lot of consistency across the literature that all these types of training are effective. So coming back to talking about strength, because this does lead into some of the factors that kind of I led in with, is do you just need to just get stronger? Do we just need to drop all this fancy, complicated training and just have people do these basic lifts and just get as strong as possible? Now, there are some specific advantages to doing those heavy lifts. There certainly are. I'm not going to say you should shy away from doing those sorts of lifts, but something to consider that the literature has really focused on is, well, how strong does an older adult need to be? And the answer is very likely strong enough. Now, you might ask, strong enough for what? And that would depend on what your client is trying to accomplish. But certainly from a functional standpoint, just going from being low function to an okay level of function, you only need a certain amount of strength, and getting stronger probably isn't going to help you to become, I'm going to say, more functional. All right, think about an older adult who is struggling to get out of a chair. Well, yeah, they probably have a strength deficit. And so getting their legs stronger is going to help them get out of the chair, right? Because their body weight is then going to be a smaller percentage of their maximal capability. So it will be easier to get out of a chair. That's going to help them. But once they can get out of a chair pretty easily, is getting stronger and stronger and stronger going to help them to get out of that chair even more easily and more easily and more easily. No, it's not, the guy who can squat 500 pounds doesn't just float out of his chair, with no effort at all. So there's certainly a limit to the return that we're going to get from being stronger. But we also see this as we move up that functional continuum and we start to think about higher level activities, like let's say recreational activities, work activities, sports performance activities that people are interested in. They do require strength, but also they are dependent on so many other factors, balance, mobility, and coordination, and power, right? These are all factors that really start to come in to being maybe even more important in these higher level activities. So again, just getting stronger and stronger is not necessarily better and better and better. And so maybe trying to focus our efforts elsewhere might be beneficial. And so we've got to consider, what are our clients trying to do? Certainly some functional tasks are going to be a little bit more strength dependent, while others doesn't really matter what your strength is. I think if you look at balance as a good example of that, strength training is not considered one of the core things that you need to do to improve balance. It's considered as an adjunct, right? Yes, it's beneficial to do it, but it doesn't really seem to help with fall prevention efforts. Why? Well, think about, how much strength do you really need? Well, if you trip, you need to move your feet quickly, right? You need to regain your steps. You need to have good coordination. You have to have good movement speed. You have to be able to step in the proper place, good proprioception, get that feedback from what's happening, at the ground up. And so is strength really that important? Well, you could say, well, if you don't want to fall down and you've got to put your foot out to catch you have to have the strength to catch yourself. And I would agree with that. But it's not really that strength dependent. Carrying a bunch of groceries into the house, is that a little bit more strength dependent? Absolutely, right? Carrying heavy loads certainly would be a little bit more strength dependent, but we've got to recognize that not all activities require huge amounts of strength. If you just have enough, if you hit that threshold, you're going to be okay. And it's all these other factors, these other domains that really become more important. And so when we think about loading and load variations, right, the higher the load that we use, the slower that we're going to be able to move that load, right? That's the basics of our force velocity relationship of our muscles. The lower the load that we use, the faster we can move. And if we're not using any load at all, that's going to give us maximal velocity, okay? When we look at the variations in loading, originally they focus on where's the peak power as people go through testing, which percentage of their 1RM is generating the most power, and they found about 50 to 60% of 1RM. But there was also variability between the individuals of where they achieved their peak power, probably because some individuals were force deficit and others were velocity deficit, so there was variability. And so originally the research focused on, well, if power is important, let's try to maximize power at the load, at the percentage where we're seeing peak power. And that was kind of originally where the research went, but then future research studies started doing more manipulations of high load versus low load and seeing what the benefits were of either one. Overall, high loading is a little bit better for strength, certainly. Not, I'm going to say anything fantastically, significantly, clinically important in my mind, but certainly individuals that need more strength maybe should focus more on higher loads, but we'll see that doesn't hold up across the board. And that when we look at the opposite end of the spectrum, really low loads where we're able to move faster, there are really some advantages to that. One, the clients think it's easier. They really do. They perceive it as easier. Even though they're giving max effort in both situations, because they're not pushing a heavy load, it just feels easy, right? If they feel like it's easier, maybe they're more likely to do it, right? They don't shy away from it. Might be one advantage. It may be better for a number of chronic conditions, for balance, and for physical function. So higher loads are not necessarily better across the board. They need to be utilized very strategically. So we are going to probably opt to doing a little bit more lower to maybe moderate loading as opposed to really high loading with our clients. And hopefully encourage a mix of loads. Again, if we don't know exactly what the optimal loading paradigm is, then we probably need to mix up our loads a little bit. And that also provides some variety for our clients as well. So thinking about exercise programming, since we don't have a lot of great direction from the literature, most of the literature has been doing this 2 to 3 sets of 10 to 12 reps, kind of basic strength training approach. But when you look outside of kind of the older adult literature to power training paradigms, you see that's not really how people and athletes improve their power. They're typically using lower reps. And so my recommendation is using 2 to 3 sets of 4 to 8 reps. And the reason that we want to think about 4 to 8 reps is even in the studies that have focused on power fatigue. So if we have you do multiple reps, let's say we have you do 10 reps at a certain load, and you're trying to generate as much power with that rep, after about 5 reps, your power really starts to drop off. And it seems to be a little bit more so when you're using the higher loads. And so I would, if you're using higher loads, I'd opt down probably towards the lower end of that spectrum in the 4 to 6 reps. If you're doing lighter loads, and that's really light, 20 to 30% of your 1RM, which a number of studies have utilized, then probably more up to the 6 to 8 reps. Now, every time they perform a rep, you ideally would like them to go as fast as possible, and that's kind of always your wording. I would like you to go as fast as possible, but still being safe, depending on what you're doing, because if you're doing some, body weight exercises or medicine ball exercises, maybe there's some balance or other issues that you want to focus on in order to keep them safe. So as fast and as safe as possible. What that means is that you usually are going to load slow so that they can then explode fast. This is not always the case. Once people kind of learn how to do this, and depending upon the movement strategy and the exercise you're utilizing, they might be able to go, fast, as quick as they can. And there are certainly some metabolic advantages to doing that. That's really going to ramp up the overall intensity because you're doing so much more in such a smaller amount of time. Okay? But typically, load slow and then explode fast. And if you've ever done this with older adults do not know how to load. I would say that middle-aged adults do not know how to load typically. And even a lot of kids don't know how to load, for anything, even like a vertical jump. So if you really want them to do this correctly, you need to teach them what loading is and what exploding is. And that's why, especially loading slow and getting in the right position, and then really focusing on that explosive movement can be better, especially from kind of at the very beginning. And when you think about this loading, like 20 to 70% 1RM, you don't have to actually test their 1RM. You're just going to use RPE, and a lower load is going to have a lower RPE associated with it, which is why people feel like the lower loads are easier. So just use RPE as a way to gauge the intensity. There's one study which I would love to see replicated, in which a group of older adults got on machines and did loaded training, and another group sat in chairs and did completely unloaded training, no equipment whatsoever. I mean, if they were doing a chest press, they literally sat in a chair and did a chest press with just their arms and nothing in it. They just tried to move as fast as possible. And they both groups improved their function similarly. Now it was a shorter term study, but I think that shows that the kind of the neurological stimulus of just trying to move fast certainly has its advantages. So you don't need to be too, picky about doing a 1RM and really matching it up specifically. Just use kind of the RPE. I would also recommend 2 days per week versus 3 or 4 or 5. Let people recover, let them come in fresh, and so they can really try to put as much effort into it as possible. And then, as I mentioned, a lot of different equipment options that are available. I've got the functional trainer by Keiser here. This is something that we have in our facility and really love because those arms move around in so many different positions. It just opens up a lot of variability that you can incorporate into your program, which I really love. And the advantage of the Keiser, if you're not familiar with it, it's pneumatic equipment. That means it's air compressed equipment, but it's air compression that's computer controlled. You know, each machine kind of has a circuit board or something that it allows you to dial up the resistance in 1 pound increments, which is really stellar to be able to dial it in that specifically. But also then the movement pattern, because it's pneumatic, is you don't have any issues with weight bouncing around or jarring or jostling as you really speed up. You get this really smooth movement throughout the pattern, no matter how fast you go. So that's why it's really advantageous for power training. And older adults really love the feeling because it's, you know, it just feels so soft and smooth on their joints. So, you know, that's an option, but like I said, you use medicine ball, other sorts of weights. You can use the pull in order to try to generate power with these clients. So a lot of variability that you have. So people ask, well, but what about, you know, the conditions that these individuals are coming in with? And so here's some conditions that have been investigated in the literature, at least to a certain extent, some of these more than others. Osteoporosis, the recommendations would be to lift heavier. And I mean doing power training exercises heavier. So being on the upper end of the spectrum. Also trying to include some impact exercises like plyometrics, which again are power training exercises that we'll talk about, and a little bit higher volume, really trying to stimulate that bone growth. There was a great study recently called the Lift More trial, in which they did heavy lifting and incorporated a little bit of plyometrics into their routines with women that had osteoporosis and osteopenia, and they found no problems at all with injuries in this study. Now, of course, they were monitored closely, but you're going to monitor your clients closely. So I think it's really important to understand, even with people with osteoporosis, in doing these exercises, they were safe. Now, I'm not going to say all exercises are as equally safe because, of course, if you're getting in some ball throwing and you're doing twisting exercises, that's not going to be good. So you have to follow some of these basic rules of people with, you know, osteoporosis and exercise movements. But doing power training isn't necessarily by itself going to be more dangerous. Osteoarthritis is a little bit different because now we want these individuals to lighten up the load a little bit, maybe do light to moderate loading in order to protect their joints. And that includes trying to avoid impact exercises most of the time. It doesn't mean we can't incorporate some higher impact movements, but you just have to see how the individuals respond. Some respond really well, others don't respond as much to some of the higher impact activities. But a lot of these studies have incorporated people with osteoarthritis, either just as allowed them into the study or have purposely looked at osteoarthritis patients, and that includes hip and knee. Frailty, I would say, for frail individuals, power is essential, and it does offer some advantages over typical strength training for improving function. And so you want your frail individuals to kind of be doing a mix of light and moderate powerlifting, and to really focus on moving as fast as possible, really try to get that neurological stimulus in. And this can have a dramatic impact on their physical abilities, which is kind of the main thing that we're concerned about here. And then also for the balance impaired, you know, if you're doing machine exercises, obviously that's not going to be as much of a concern. But if you're doing, you know, body weight exercises or other types of exercise around the gym, you might be concerned if they already have balance problems. Well, you know, how do I do power training with them? Well, you're going to have to just be smart about your programming, you know, giving them kind of putting them in areas and positions of safety, allowing them to hold on or to use some sort of balance, you know, device, or just put them on machines. And some of the initial studies that have looked into some of the load manipulations have found that the lightest loads seem to improve balance the most, which is interesting. So lifting light and moving as fast as possible seem to be keys to improving balance. And then adding in some complexity and coordination, which we know is a balance issue in and of itself, but when you're trying to move fast, which is power, trying to incorporate that speed into the complexity and coordination, that kind of has a double stimulus for these individuals to improve balance. So a lot of conditions that have been found to be improved and benefit from power training. So when we look at strength and power training and just kind of make a comparison between the two, I would say that strength is important. We don't want to throw that out. I don't want people to misunderstand is that, strength is an important factor, and especially people that have lost quite a bit of strength for whatever reason, poor lifestyle, aging, combination of both, they could probably stand to be a little bit stronger. And so doing some strength training is going to be beneficial for them. But focusing on strength training and improving strength as kind of be the primary thing that we do might not be the most beneficial in the long run. It might yield some good results initially. But at some point, these other factors such as power become really important. And even from a lifting standpoint, I didn't really show this research, but there's a number of experts that have come out with some publications saying, look, if we just had people doing the minimal of strength training, which is low load, low volume strength training, they're going to have benefits from it. They're going to experience benefits from it, and they're going to get stronger. And that it's very true that, as much as I, I'm a fan of kind of more functional type of training routines, if you just get older adults, put them on a circuit of machines and just do the basic, couple of sets of strength training at moderate loads, that's going to be beneficial for them. Now, yes, there's going to be a ceiling to the return on that, but they argue that, low loads and low doses can really be impactful. And then once they kind of reach that threshold, maybe we need to move on to other things, okay? So older adults can load heavy. There's no reason why they can't unless they have some specific factor or condition that would be contraindicated. But really the question is, should they? I mean, do they really have to? If they want to build bone mineral density, yeah, they probably do need to load heavy. But from a strength and a power standpoint, we're seeing lots of benefits from low, moderate loads. And so forcing individuals to kind of go heavy and to go hard is probably not necessary. And I think the word force is probably the best word to use, because we know some of our clients don't like that type of effort and don't like that type of training. And it just doesn't make them feel good, especially from a joint standpoint. So my recommendation is, don't focus on getting strong and just getting stronger and then stronger and stronger and not spending that time in other areas. And so if your individuals don't seem to have a big strength deficit, you just jump right into power training and do some of these other types of training for these other domains instead of spending all your time focusing on just building strength. So let's look at some of the power training strategies that I think are important and are effective. I typically talk about power exercises in these 4 categories. We have lifts, just your basic lifting type exercises, whether that's a leg press or a leg extension, or it is a chest press or a row. It's just a basic strength training lift. And then we have throws, and these are typically going to involve medicine balls or some other objects that we're throwing to try to develop power. Jumps, this is where we get into some plyometrics. This also includes even kind of leading up to jumping. And so we'll talk about like power stands, where you don't actually leave the floor, but that really becomes kind of a form of a jump. It's kind of a jump prequel, so to speak. And then starts and stops, and these are going to be more fast type of gait patterns. And all these types of exercises are going to help to generate power and really help to improve speed and contractile velocity in our older clients. Now, I do like to focus on the 7 fundamental movement patterns. think that's a really great approach to take, and I would highly recommend that when you're putting, programs together, that you have this in your mind as you're looking at developing different types of exercises and putting them together in kind of your mix of overall mix of exercises in your programs. This is a good model to use. So I would recommend that. I'm not going to really go through this model specifically, but you'll see it reflected in a lot of the things that we're going to be showing. So let's start with looking at this frail and pre-frail group. So this is a group that certainly has some functional deficits, they have some balance deficits. Typically, these frail individuals are just moving slower. They're not moving as much. They may have some comorbidities that we're concerned about. And so they're really on the low end of our functional continuum. So, I mean, what can you do for power for this group? Well, getting them to just move fast is really important. And so we're going to do that in any way that we can. Sometimes that means being creative and deviating from some of the norms. But I think this is also a really good population to focus on the machine training. So using like the Keiser leg press and the leg extension, the leg curl, and other exercise stations can be very valuable here, because one of the primary considerations that we need to think about is balance. They have a lot of balance issues. So if we're trying to do stuff on the floor, balance can get in the way of them trying to move as fast as possible. So they're a lot more fearful. They're fearful of falling, of getting injured. They might not necessarily have the motivation to move fast. It's kind of well, I don't move fast because why would I move fast? I don't understand. Why do I need to move fast? They don't quite understand in many cases. We have to explain that to them. But so they need to know, well, why are you making me do this? What is the benefit of it? And then there's kind of the factor of, what do you want me to do? Because if you're telling me to do kind of a freestanding exercise, I'm thinking about 10 different things while I'm doing it. It's tough for me to focus on just moving quickly. And so those are some challenges that we have, but getting on the machines can be a way to overcome all those and just focus on, all you have to do is press out, but press out as fast as you can and teach them how to load and explode. Using bands can be effective, especially for things like leg extension or leg curl, trying to get them to move as fast as possible. Assisted power stands. So a power stand is just getting up out of a chair from a seated position as fast as you can. You are powering up as quickly as you're able to. Well, if they struggle getting out of the chair and they're going really slowly, even though they're moving as fast as they can, probably somewhat defeating the purpose. So this is a little bit like kind of overspeed training for sprinting. In overspeed training, you've got you're getting ready to start, but you've got a band around your waist. A resistance band is leading out in front of you that somebody else is connected to. So it's going to help assist pulling you forward right from the start. And so we can use some assisted power stands to help people figure out, man, this is what moving quickly is like, to try to get them to put all their force into standing up. Bug stomps are a good one. Typically, you want people to hold on when they do bug stomps, but it's very simple. You tell them to imagine that there's lots of big roaches on the ground, and that you need them to stomp those bugs as fast, as powerfully as possible. Having them do step-ups or even a get-up and go exercise where they're going to get up out of a chair and basically walk fast for 5 yards. Chair drills are a good one. I really like chair drills. And this is where you set up chairs in any pattern you want. So let's say you have a row of chairs. Each of them are separated by 5 feet, but one chair faces north, and the next one faces south, the next one faces north, the next one faces south. And what they do is they sit in the first chair and you say go, and they have to get up, run around to the next chair that's just facing in the opposite direction, sit down, stand up, go to the next one, sit down, stand up. So you're incorporating a little bit of complexity, but you're trying to make it fun at the same time and get them to just move. So they're focusing on the task, not necessarily the exercise. Red light, green light, classic kids game, is something that's probably better for pre-frail than frail, because you do have some concerns with them trying to move fast and tripping and not being able to stop. So all these you have to be cautious on. And then dot drills is a little bit similar to bug stumps, but now you're going to put a dot in a specific location. So let's say I just put a dot out in front of the individual, and I just say, I want you to just step forward onto that dot with your right foot as fast as you can. And that includes transferring your weight. Then you're going to step back. Now do it with your left foot as fast as you can. And again, you're giving them a target just to try to get them to move as quickly as possible. So these are just some examples of exercises that you can use for these frail and pre-frail clients. Again, remember, balance is an issue. You want to take that kind of out of the equation as much as you can so that they can, in fact, move as fast as they're able to. Okay. As we move up in kind of the lower and higher independent group, that opens up a lot more options for what people are able to do. So now we can look at not just using a leg press, but what about a running leg press? And what I mean by that is the Keiser leg press has 2 foot pads that you're able to separate so they have independent movement. So now what you can do is you can actually push out with your right leg and leave your left leg back, and then you can reverse it. Basically like you're running, right? So one leg is powering out while the other is coming back. And so that's, I kind of call that the running leg press. You might call it a single leg press. But that can be kind of an upper level strategy for this group. Now getting into power stands where they don't need any balance help, but focusing on power stands can be beneficial. And if it's a little light for them, now we can add a little bit of load. We can actually have them hold a sandbag as an example in order to do their power stand with. The what time is it exercise adds some complexity and adds some multidimensionality to this. And this can also be very scalable. So you can have people stepping or you can have them lunging. So it's just basically like a clock lunge, right? You're standing in the middle of a clock face. 12 o'clock is in front, 3 to the right, 6 behind, 9 to the left. All the other numbers are filled in. You call out a time, and they either have to step and weight shift to that time and come back quickly, or they lunge to that time and come back quickly. So they're trying to move as fast as they can through that movement. And you can then speed them up by just calling out times more quickly. So you can allow them to step and then return, and then you pause and call out another number, or while they're stepped out and returning, you call out the next number, and then you call out the next number. So they start to get a little behind and they've got to speed up. Wall balls, classic CrossFit exercise, taking a medicine ball right here at your chest, loaded elbows underneath. You're going to squat down, and then you're going to stand up from your squat position, really explode the ball above you. It hits the wall, comes back down, you catch it, and you do it again. Stair climbs. Now get a flight of stairs. Go up these stairs as quickly as you can. Boom, 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 boom. Really try to power up the stairs. Fast feet. You're doing front and back over a line, side to side over a line. You can have them stepping in a box pattern, front, front, side, side, back, back, side, side, and then reverse it. And even agility ladder exercises. Now remember, with agility ladder exercises, the more complex you make it, probably the slower they're going to go, because they've got to think about it a lot. And then also there's some balance issues and coordination issues that come in. Now those are good things to address, but if you just want people to move fast, you should probably keep your agility ladder combos relatively simple. We have kicks, we have rows, we have presses and punches that you can throw in there, and even things like fake falls. So if you've ever seen sprinters, sprinters have a kind of a sprint technique from their start. Well, in a standing position, they come up on the balls of their feet, and then they slowly lean forward. Now, as they basically fall forward, and when they get as far forward as they can, and now they're falling, they then take their, let's say, their right leg up, and then put it down and take off into their sprint start. So you can do the same thing without the sprint start. Have them stand up, go on their toes, fall forward, and as they're falling forward, then they take that right foot, they lift it up, and they place it on the ground really powerfully and stop themselves from falling. And then you can do that with your left leg as well. Keiser, the functional trainer, I really love the combo push-pull. That's one of the advantages, where you actually are doing a row and a press at the exact same time. So you're in between The handle positions, one is directly in front, one is behind. And so one, I'm doing a row, and the other one, I'm doing a press, and I'm doing them at the same time, which creates a lot of rotational power, but I'm not rotating. I'm trying to keep my core engaged and keep my core stable. Line hops or bunny hops, now we start to get both feet off the ground. That can then turn into some small jumps. You can take a power stand and add a little jump to it. You can have them just hop forward a little bit like a broad jump. You can start to incorporate some box jumping or even some jumping jacks. That's very good for power. Maybe some short sprints. Now that you're kind of again moving up and more to the higher independent group, short sprints are one of those that maybe they don't move as fast as possible, but they're trying to move faster. Medicine ball throws, lots of different types of medicine ball throws. You can go from kind of your knees and just throw it overhead. You can take the ball over your head, slam it down. I really like the lifting up power much more. And then a lot of fun games that you can incorporate that are reaction drills. Chase the ball is a good one. An individual is just standing there maybe about 5-10 yards away, and you have a bucket of tennis balls, and you just roll the tennis balls, and they have to shuffle over, catch the ball, throw it back to you, shuffle over again. So they're doing a lot of shuffling, a lot of forward and backwards motions as quickly as they can. You can add relays, if you're using groups, and even something like just a turn and catch. So their back is to you, and they try to turn around as fast as they can while the ball is in the air, and they catch it, throw it back. They turn back around to their back to you, and then turn back around again. Of course, you need to do that in different directions, but just trying to get them to move as fast as they can possibly move. Now, all the exercises that we looked at for the frail can, of course, be just kind of upregulated for the lower and higher independent folks as well. So there's a lot of overlap here. It's just a matter of how you scale it, right? That's very important. When you think about the fit and athletic group, look at this guy. This guy is 82, 83 years old. He's doing a 30-inch box jump. So that's, I think, awesome that he can do this. Does this mean we need to try to get all of our 80-year-old clients doing box jumps? No. I know some of you are very against doing any sort of plyometrics, getting off the ground at all. But look at the power that's required for him to do that. Plus, look at his technique. Very good loading, exploding, and landing. And that's something that if we want to be effective with our clients, we're going to have to teach them how to use those skills. Teach them how to load, how to explode, how to land, properly. So a lot of different plyometrics that you can incorporate into these more fit and athletic populations. And then even going up to things like, well, what about power rows or hang cleans or push presses? Well, it's going to depend on the individual. I want to put this in here because we don't want to just use age, as an excuse not to do these things. There's a guy in his 70s, kind of a famous CrossFitter, and he does all these sorts of things. And like for his 70th birthday, they did like 70 reps of all these different types of exercises, push presses, and I think burpees and jump ropes and all sorts of things, showing there's a lot more that's possible than sometimes we give our older adults credit for. So yes, we want to be safe. We want to be realistic, but also just don't hold back because they're older. If they can continue to progress, then we should let them progress. So again, we take everything we've done for the other groups and we can do the same thing for this group. There's no reason why a fit or athletic individual can't do a Keiser leg press, right? Or can't do a wall ball or do a fake fall exercise, right? These are all going to still be applicable and should be able to perform it at a higher level. So a lot of different strategies here. Now, just really quickly about plyometrics, because I always like to kind of focus on this at least a little bit. I'm really big on teaching the loading, exploding, teaching the landing mechanics. That's really important. And there are some things that you can go through to help build people up and actually build up their confidence in leaving the ground. One of the balance scales, actually the Fullerton Advanced Balance Scale, which is designed for people that aren't as low functioning. If you're familiar with the Berg Balance Scale as an example, that's kind of a lower functioning scale. the FABs, Fullerton Advanced Balance Skills, more for these independent folks. And one of the tasks that they have you do is just doing a little jump, a little hop, 2 foot to 2 foot jump to see if you can at least get the length of your feet. And so even things like that can be very beneficial, but we want to teach them how to do that. One thing I don't really want, I don't like to see are depth jumps, because depth jumps are where you jump off an object. Let's say you jump off a step bench, land on the floor, and then immediately explode up onto like a plyo box. And the reason I don't like that is yes, it's a very powerful exercise, but also there's a lot of compression, a lot of kind of jarring that occurs typically with that. So that's very advanced. I'm not saying that older adults cannot use this, but I would be kind of wary of it. And even with box jumps, there's always a chance of tripping. So why not just have them, jump as high as possible without anything there? That's also possible for this group. We're just doing a really low box jump to create a soft landing surface for them. So some things to consider. Well, I hope this has been beneficial for you. I really appreciate you guys being here. Power training is something that I'm going to keep talking about a lot, especially from the research side of things, but also the practical. How do you do it side in this program? You definitely need to check out the Keiser equipment and consider that. And I posted this this video, why Keiser for older adults, which highlights Paul Holbrook, one of our board members, and his performance in his facility in Salt Lake City called Age Performance. Really cool to see how he utilizes the equipment with a lot of different older adults. It's kind of eye-opening, I think, if you haven't seen what he's doing, especially kind of in the speed area. Really focuses a lot on speed with his older clients. So again, appreciate you guys being here. Please reach out to us with any questions you might have from this presentation, and really wish you the best. And thank you for being here and being a part of the Functional Aging Summit.